Patagonia. On the footwear side, there was really not that much. So that's when I decided to launch a brand, focused on footwear. And I didn't know how complex it was to make a pair of shoes. Our shoes are more sustainable than most of the shoes on the market today. When I look at my kids, I'm like, what world are they going to live in? And I realized that what I'm trying to do is
In this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Guillaume Linossier, founder and CEO of the sustainability-focused footwear brand SAOLA. Guillaume spent the first 15 years of his career working for the Lafuma Group before founding SAOLA in 2015. We talk about running a brand in the US versus Europe, the ups and downs of founding a business, including the challenge of getting funding, and much more. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please like, comment, and if you're not already, please subscribe. Guillaume, so I guess first question is actually, what would you like the audience to get out of this discussion? What would you like the audience to understand about you and your business?
Well, I think it's just to learn about our business, but really. I would say maybe the international aspect of doing business, as well as maybe the ups and downs of launching your own business.
Yeah. So straight in after education, after your studies, into Lafuma, so into the outdoor industry. Was there any particular reason why the outdoor industry?
There were two reasons. First, I love sports, so that to me that was just an industry that was very appealing. And I've always been very passionate about the environment. In fact, after high school, I went and studied some in chemistry classes. But after a few months, I realized I was really not a scientist, and so I switched to do to a business school, and then after I when I had to find internships and was thinking about the next steps, the outdoor industry was really in mind. So I started at Lafuma as an intern, in fact. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So when you took that decision to study, when you made that switch from chemistry to business and international business specifically, did you already have in mind then that actually, I would like to live and work outside of France in another market?
Yeah, that was, I've traveled a lot with my parents as a kid. Was always loved being abroad. And so that was definitely part of my journey. And I worked, when I applied at Lafuma as an intern, it was in the export department. So from day one, basically, I worked with other countries. And in fact, I realized after a few years in the US, when I came back to France, that I never worked in France or with French people before. So
okay,
yeah.
Okay, how are you finding that?
Oh, that's it's the same way as adapting to German culture or US culture, or it's just have to learn how people process things on the work side. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so as you mentioned, so your first role at Lafuma was in the export. Looking back at that time now, those first years in that first role, was there anything that stands out as kind of lessons that you learned at that time that have been applicable, would you say, even today?
I would say, when you work, in general, but internationally, you have to listen and really try to focus on understanding what other people have to say and what they mean. Because, you can understand, if you speak English, you can understand what they are saying, but I think the goal is to really understand the angle that they are coming from. Yeah.
Any bad experiences or kind of lessons that you maybe learned that the hard way, maybe at those early stages? Because I agree, it's quite a it's a difficult thing to do, especially at the start of the career.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more, you meet new people, new sales agents, new distributors. You're getting excited by the potential of what's going to come, and then just with some it's not coming or it's not working. And so I think that's the biggest frustration that you learn from the start is it's really a personal thing. So I mean, with some people, things and partnerships are going to work, and with some you think it's going to work, and no, it fails.
Yeah, absolutely. And how, so in those situations where you have those disappointments, let's call them, and maybe frustrations, how are you dealing with that? Do you have a particular approach to dealing with that type of thing where you have those frustrations?
Well, I really try to focus on the goal. I'm very goal driven, and so if it's not a straight line from A to B, then you just have to find some other routes or the path, and then you just absorb the issue and then just move on and find solutions.
You mentioned there that you're very goal driven. So I'm interested, is that something where you very clearly lay out short, mid and long term goals, or how do you work with that? How do you use that as a tool?
Well, I mean, it's more in my mind where I kind of have a vision of where I want to be in a year and 2 years, and then same on the business side. So when and you learn from being on the road, and being with a bunch of different people, different nationalities as well. So, and when there is when there are challenges, because there are for sure, then it's just like, how do you overcome these
Okay. After that initial role, so I think it was 2 to 3 years in the export department. You then took the big decision and made the big step to move to the US. So I think that at that point you were then general manager of the US business, and had to lead some kind of transformation reorganization. So I'm interested, when you took that decision, what was the thought process there? Did you see at that stage, okay, this is a kind of long-term plan for me, or was it just somehow quite opportunistic? What was your mindset in those days?
So the first 2-3 years at Lafuma and MIE, I was just so I was in charge of Eastern Europe and Scandinavia, and I was traveling like 70% of my time, mostly in Eastern Europe, and I really loved it. But the US was always appealing to me. I did an internship during my business school in the US, and I was like, at some point I want to go back. So in fact, when I moved to the US, it was to grow the Lafuma outdoor business. They were already doing some business with their camp furniture line. And so I went and I, started to learn, and there was already a small subsidiary in place with a general manager, and they were dealing with some other brands from the group. But then quickly I realized there were challenges in the subsidiary, a lot of problem with inventory management. And then I asked the previous general manager after like 4 or 5 months, I'm like, when was the last time you did a physical inventory of the products? And the inventory was in Chicago, which was very far from Colorado. And he told me, I think it was, it was about 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, maybe we should do one. So I organized to have a physical inventory done in the US, and we found a huge discrepancy. And so the next step, in fact, was for our CEO to come, and he fired most of the team and told me, okay, you're in charge. So that's how I became a general manager of the
Okay.
subsidiary. So it was a very, I was young. I learned, I worked hard for 2-3 years, like nonstop. But but I learned so much during those years. We had to clean up all inventory. We, brought our inventory in-house. And then we took on some other brands. So, my plan initially was to go to the US for a couple of years, and then I stayed 13 years. And because every time, and every year there were either new brands coming into us, as part of the group, or new, exciting stuff. So I had a blast during all those years, working for the Lafuma Group. Yeah.
Okay, so a pretty interesting 12 months, I guess, then, first 12 months.
Yeah.
But that period then of the first few years when you took over as GM and led the business, I guess a little bit the same question to what I asked you before. What were those kind of, did you have any, looking back now, any kind of mistakes that you made in those first years that you kind of reflect on now and are like, if I know what I know now, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done things differently at that time?
I would say maybe one of the mistakes was not to ask for enough help when I needed help, and maybe not focus enough also on the work and life balance.
Okay.
For at least 2 years, I was there like 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, just trying to get things reorganized and kind of relaunched.
Yeah.
And after some point, I realized that it was not sustainable. So, so I started to ask for more help. We hired a few people, and then, I definitely tried to still work hard, but have some fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think those early years of a career, I think that's especially when you're so passionate about what you're doing in the industry, and you've been given that great opportunity to lead the business there. So to put 100 and whatever percent in
sure.
is probably quite common. But so looking back now, you're seeing that as something. But do you think you identified that in those days, or is it something that only now that you really look back on and realize?
I don't think I fully realized back then. I know, and from even my now experience with SAOLA over the last few years, that that's one thing. Work-life balance. Even if it's a challenge, I try to really focus on having one that's healthy.
Yeah.
But it was just back then I was just getting really, really tired, and I was just really starting to feel it personally. So that's kind of what triggered the change at the time.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So it actually got to the point where it started, let's say it started physically almost impacting you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, it's tough to see it and tough to admit when those signs are there. I think especially when you're young. But
you always feel that you're stronger than everyone else, and that it's those kind of issues are for others. But you realize at some point that it can definitely have a strong impact on you.
Yeah. No, for sure. So when you look back of those 13 years in that role with the Lafuma Group, what would you say you're most proud of that time?
What I'm the most proud of is, of course, we grew the business, so that's that was an achievement. But one thing I was really proud of was the team I put together. We are still in touch with many of the team members today, and I think people were happy to come and work. We were just really trying to find again a fun, work environment, and so that's one thing I'm, happy and proud of.
Yeah. And I guess somehow that period must have had somehow quite a profound impact on you, because essentially you moved, as you said, what originally was for maybe a couple of years in your mind. And okay, you're no longer with the Lafuma Group, but you're still living in the US, still living in Colorado.
Yeah.
So what is it what's kept you there, let's say? So you talked about what kind of took you there, but what's kept you there, would you say?
What kept me there is Colorado. It's a fantastic state to live in. The weather is amazing, and you have the mountains right there as well, and just the American people. I love the way they think, they work. Everything is quite easy and very straightforward, and that's one thing I'd make it easy for me to work with. And it's when I come back to France, and when I came back to France after all those years for the Lafuma Group, the readjusting to the European culture was definitely a challenge. It took 2, 3, 4 years, so that's really what kept me there. And my daughters were born in the US too, so now we have a strong connection with the country.
You've talked about in the past, in other interviews, the kind of the cultural differences, and you touched on this actually earlier on in our conversation. So what are those kind of big cultural differences that you've seen, and how were you able to kind of adapt to that, and have you adapted to that, would you say? I mean, do you consider yourself more American or more French?
I think I'm a mix of both, and if you ask French people, they might say I'm a little bit American, and same thing on the other side. I'm not fully American, and you can hear with my accent anyway. But it's one thing is I'm in the US. People are very enthusiastic, very excited about new stuff, projects, and sometimes you're like, wow, it's gonna be big, and then it's not as big as you think. So I've learned really to kind of tone down all levels of excitements, and have expectations that are not aligned with this excitement as well. So trying to be more cautious, and that's I would say that's one of the biggest difference between Europe or France and the US, where in the US it's maybe too much, and in Europe it's not enough. I
like to think that the UK is somewhere in
between.
That's
right.
But maybe I'm biased. Okay, so you leave the Lafuma Group, and then you took the decision to found your own business, your own brand, SAOLA. So, I mean, we'll get into kind of that in a little bit more detail, but what was the motivation? Because, I mean, that's, it's a big change, working for somebody else, working in a business that, you have that security there. Taking that step to do your own thing is a big decision. So, what was the drivers for you to do that?
It's a big decision, but you don't know how big the decision is and how much it will impact your life. But I've one of the reason why I also joined the outdoor industry was as I mentioned earlier, I was really passionate about the environment and concerned about all the environmental issues, and the more I worked in the industry, the more I felt disconnected between the the marketing of the brands and what was really going on, and on the production side, and really the concern that in fact most of brands didn't have. So I learned a lot being in the US from brands, of course Patagonia, but some other brands like Tom's footwear, that was they were really using their business to try to make a change. And so I was like, I loved all those years at Lafuma, but at some point I was like, I'm ready for a new challenge, and I wanted to launch my own business. So I would say the missions came before the brand. So from day one, I had two missions really clear in my mind, which were, to work on sustainable manufacturing, and to also, work with some NGOs, specifically focused on wildlife preservation, which was another topic I'm really passionate about. And then it's more when I, started to look at options as far as type of brands, type of products that, I looked at, the different markets. On the apparel side, there were already some brands really, focused, like, Picture especially in Europe at the time, but, Patagonia. On the footwear side, there was really not that much. So that's when I decided to launch a brand, focused on footwear.
Yeah.
And also, when I worked for the Lafuma Group, we had several brands, most of them being quite technical. And I realized also, and especially being a foreign brand, in the US, for example, that distribution was, focused but somewhat limited. And there were a lot of places we couldn't sell to because there was just no outdoor ski shops. And so that's also why I wanted to be, more in the lifestyle segment, so that we could, have a wider distribution. And today, for example, we sell into outdoor shops, some surf shops, some lifestyle boutiques. We are in contact with some department stores, so we can really, have different kind of angles in terms of distribution. Yeah.
Okay. So you hinted there that the decision was maybe, and the changes it brought were maybe bigger than even you expected. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, first, when you start from scratch, one thing it took me some time, in fact, to be really focused, because, when you have all these options in front of you, then you lose time. So, so I lost time, I would say, the first 18 months of launching the brand, because I was not focused enough on really what it should be. And then, at first you don't pay yourself, so it's like just a complete change of lifestyle. It just has an impact on you, but on your family as well. So you want to make sure that your wife is, in line with the project. And then you always, look at brands online, like startups that, where the business grows like super fast. And in fact, you don't see the 99% of the startups that it's a slower path. So that's, you learn as you go. And so it just has just not a business impact, but just a full life impact of launching your own business after having a career where you have a good job, you have a good income. So that's the biggest change. Yeah.
You talked there about the difficulty in let's say the first 18 months. You mentioned there about the focus. What was it or was there something that kind of refocused you, or somebody or something in your mind that decided, okay, no, this is it, this is what I'm going to do, and that's the focus?
Well, it was just more like, after, I worked from home. And, after like 6-7 months, I was like, man, I'm not going anywhere, because I was exploring a bunch of options. And so at some point I was like, okay, you need to, if you want to make it work, you need to move faster than what you are doing right now. So then I kind of lay down all the options on the table, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, the type of products, the type of positioning, and okay, let's focus on this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was really a self-reflection that kind of forced you to take those decisions. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, maybe that's one of them. Maybe you've already touched on it, but again, similar question. So looking back at those early years, other than maybe the focus thing, what are the things that maybe the mistakes that on reflection you made, or at least the things that maybe you would do differently if you had your time again?
I think again, but I guess I made the same mistake twice. I would seek for more help, and I would say, I would also try to raise money earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, because and it's always easier to say now that back then. But when I launched, we had very, very limited resources, and that's at the same time you're like, okay, I'm not taking too much risk, but then that's also what makes it slower than you have in your mind. So at the end of the day, cash is what drives the business, and the more you have, I would say maybe the faster you can go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you, talking about then the funding side, were you able to build funding up through kind of friends and family, or did you have to go out further than that?
Yeah, I did friends and family at first.
Okay.
And that was also a tough decision for me, because I really didn't want to impact those relationships, and it's we're definitely at a stage where everything is at risk.
Yeah.
I mean, still today, but more back then. And then when COVID hit, I was like, I didn't know what the next steps would be, and so all those friends and family members invested in the company, and I was like, I can't let that go. So that's one thing that helps you push. You don't want to disappoint people, in your circle, I would say. Yeah.
So you touched on COVID there.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you handle that period? Because you launched, if I remember well, so you launched in the US, Canada in 2018.
That's right.
Right, and then Europe in 2019. So let's say you were 2 years or 1 year in, depending on the region, and then COVID hit. So what did you do? I mean, how did you deal with that? Because it must have been, as you said, such a shock to business. I mean, shock to any business, but I guess it could have really been something that really just killed the business, stopped the business dead.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was it was crazy times in Europe. We in fact we delivered and we shipped all the products on a Friday for our spring selling season to our retailers, and on a Saturday the government announced that shops would be closed starting on Monday. So we took all the products back. And then in the US, we shipped part of the orders for spring. We were about 90% of our business was wholesale. So within a few days, we lost 70% of our customers. And then I just remember one day we had our biggest customer was in the US. It was REI, and they were doing about 50% of our business. We shipped about half of their orders. Then the buyer called me. I was in my small apartment in France, and she's like, "Well, I think we have to cancel the rest of the order." And I told her, I'm like, "If you cancel, I understand. We'll be done." And then she told me, "Okay, let me look at it." And then she called me back a couple of hours later and like, "Okay, we're going to keep your orders in." And that's what, I was like, okay, we have a chance maybe to go through this crisis. Yeah. And then our online business started to pick up a little bit. I was also, in France, we could go within like, half a mile or 1 kilometer around the house. So I went and put flyers into mailboxes where, I was like, trying to sell shoes. So then I started to deliver shoes with my bike and just try to, find options. And between online and, all the stuff I could do locally, when the stores reopened, in fact, we had sold, more than half of what we had. So in fact, some stores we couldn't ship after COVID. But it was definitely a big challenge because we, then all the stores were, struggling. It took them a couple of years to start to look at new brands again. So the 21, 22 were definitely slow for us. I mean, we were doing online business 70%, and then I was just waiting for the wholesale to start again, basically. Yeah.
Well, that's that's an amazing story that you were actually out, as you said, on your bike, delivering flyers, delivering shoes. But I mean, it shows incredible resilience and drive. Just to, like you said, maybe with that pressure, that accountability somehow of that funding, that you're like, okay, well, you just have to do whatever you have to do.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I didn't have a real job back then, so I was like, I have to just to find solutions and move some shoes. So that's what I was trying to do every day. And so I mean, resilience is definitely something you learn when you launch your business, for sure. And it's, if you want to try to make it last, you have to accept all these ups, but all the downs, and then you just keep working, and then things hopefully gets better.
Yeah. So you mentioned that at the start you were mainly wholesale. Was that because around that sort of time, direct consumer brands were, let's say, becoming more and more common? So what was the thought process there? Was it because maybe that's where your experience was more from a wholesale point of view, or we
launched the website and the e-commerce from day one, but I had no expertise on that part of the business. And my vision was, wholesale. First, I understood the whole process, but I was like, well, I mean, that also will give us some volume to get started. I had no idea launching online how much business we would do. So to me, that was a strong focus. We were, I was starting to learn more, as far as e-commerce and online business. And so before COVID, our business was about 70% wholesale, 30% D2C. In fact, sorry, that was about 90% wholesale, 10% D2C. Okay. And then it just changed a lot with COVID. Now we have a business, it's about 65% wholesale, 35% e-commerce. And it's really a good balance.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned a couple of times through the process, through this discussion, that the sustainability side and protection of the environment is something that's really important for you. I guess, first of all, why is that? What is the kind of the driver there for you? I mean, you said you spent time in the outdoors as a family, as a kid. Is that where it came from, or?
Well, I mean, I'm really concerned, and when I see the issue with climate change, with the number of species that disappear, and when I look at my kids, I'm like, what world are they going to live in? And I realize that what I'm trying to do is micro, part of potential solution, but I would not be working as hard if the environmental impact that we can have wouldn't be there, for sure. And I realize that it's really a bunch of very small projects, small changes that will make things bigger and change, and so we just want to be part of it.
Okay. And so you've, going that route, at least when you started, is probably not the easiest route to take, and certainly not the probably quite expensive as well. So how have you approached that? And have you seen, I mean, I know it's not, the business has been going for a long time, but in the time that you have been going, have you seen things shift in the way that the sustainable materials and also sourcing in a more ethical way is becoming more, let's say, cost efficient for you?
I mean, it's definitely a lot more expensive than just, if we would use regular materials. And that's one of the challenges, I would say, from bigger brands to shift to a more sustainable approach is, when you have a business model and, cost margins and the kind of profits you have to make. And if you want to switch to, more sustainable materials, for example, it's a big challenge for us. I mean, it was from day one. So I built the whole business and our margin structure and all that based on based on those materials and the needs. So there are more and more options, and a big part of what we do every day is to try to go and source the most innovative and sustainable materials. And it's always a matter of compromise. There is no perfect solution. Our shoes are more sustainable than most of the shoes on the market today. But there are materials where we're like, okay, it's 100% recycled. We can go, at a higher rate. So that's great. But there are a lot of materials we use, especially with our winter collections, where it's, 35% recycled or bio-based. And it's like, how can we go to a higher level than that? And so it's, I'm always looking for new trends, new materials, and that's a big focus for us on the product development side. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And do you feel that the consumer is willing to pay more for sustainable product, or is it more of a let's say it's a nice to have rather than a kind of a driver in the decision making process?
I think you have different crowds, and for example, when we look at our online business, I would say most people come to the website because they are looking for sustainable solutions and sustainable products. So those consumers are willing to pay a little bit more for that type of products. On the wholesale sites and when we are in the stores, that's a different story. I would say, and I don't have exact numbers, but 90% of consumers come, they are looking for a pair of shoes, and they will buy our shoes because they like the style, they like the comfort and the lightness that we have. And the sustainable story will come at the end. So it really depends on, on the type of consumers. We are, one of the mission I had also from day one was to try to be at reasonable prices. So I would say, I'm sure we work with lower margins than a lot of brands. But my goal is to try to give access to a maximum of people to sustainable products. And so that's what, our shoes are between 100 and 129 euros, for example, in the spring summer collection. And when I look at other sustainable brands, a lot of brands are around 200 euros. And it's, that's a price that a lot of people can't afford for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Listening to you talk, I realized that before you started your own business, your previous role in Lafuma Group was, I'm assuming, a dangerous thing to do, but assuming it was 99.9% commercial driven and general management rather than being involved from a product point of view. So that's been quite a shift for you, because I listen to you now and talking about kind of sourcing and the materials. So is that something that you've had to kind of invest in terms of kind of elevating your own knowledge and experience, or is that also about, I guess, the people that you've brought into the business as well?
Yeah, so I worked with designers and a product manager, like freelance at first, but I had no idea first what I was doing and how complex the whole process was. And I worked in sales before for Lafuma, and during sales meeting, it was very easy to criticize the product people, like, this sample is not perfect, blah, 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 and this color is not right. And so I, in fact, called a few of my previous co-workers working in the R&D for the Lafuma Group and apologized for being tough during those meetings sometimes, because I had no idea, and that how hard it was just to get products done and products done on time. So I really learned a lot, the first few years with SAOLA about the production side, product development side, and I didn't know also how complex it was to make a pair of shoes. When you look at the products every day, you're like, okay, it's a simple product, but it's a lot more complex than you think. And sizing, fit, assembly, material assembly. It's not easy. And some days I wish I would just make socks, but maybe socks are not easy to wear to manufacture either. So I don't know. Yeah.
So a steep learning curve then,
Yeah.
on many levels, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I had sales experience, I had management experience, but definitely no experience on the product development side. So that was a big learning curve at first. Yeah.
So we already touched on this, but you took the decision to launch first in the US and Canada versus Europe. And in fact, today you're split. So you have an office in Boulder and an office here in Annecy, where we are today. But why the US first? And also, well, let's go with that one first.
Why the US first? I mean, it was pretty easy. I mean, all my connections were in the US. I didn't know many people in Europe. So I had connections with sales reps, with buyers. And so it was an easier launch for me than trying to go to Europe first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I understand well, you've kind of kept the two, let's say, bases, because I think in terms of running a business, the costs are quite a bit higher in the US.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it must add quite a level of complexity being, split like that.
Yeah.
What's your kind of approach there, and how do you deal with that? How do you kind of manage that split?
It's again, as I always worked internationally, to me that was just a no-brainer, and I almost didn't think about it and all the consequences it could have. It was definitely, and it still definitely is, a costly approach. But at the same time, I'm like, if we can, work in different countries and different continents, it's also, with time, it can also be a safer approach, because if there is a crisis in Europe, and we all know that there are a lot of challenges right now, then maybe the North American market is more stable at this time, and it's same way on the other side as well. So that was just kind of my thinking behind it, and when I first launched in the US, again, my connections were there, and my understanding of the market was stronger, of the North American market, than the European one. So the US was gonna be there, even if a lot of people here in France were telling me, okay, you should just focus on France for the first few years. But so that's the angle I took, and I'm happy now because it's we have a good balance between both continents. But it's definitely creating challenges, more cost and expenses. And today in our organization, most of the team is in France. We have just 2 people in the US, and then some independent sales reps. And then we grow the team in the US as we grow, the business. But the cost of employees in the US is very high, and in fact it's much higher than in France, even with all the taxes we have to pay. So for now, we just really try to have a strong European team that handles and manages the US business, and then we'll see what the next steps are.
So they're managing the US business from here as well. Then okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have our CFO here, manages all the accounting and finance for both. Customer service is run from here.
Okay.
So we also have automatized a lot of processes. So consumers in the US don't have to reach out to us that often.
Yeah.
And even with sales rep, in the US, I told them, okay, if you send an email in the afternoon in the US, you will hear back from the team the next day.
Yeah.
So that's the whole process is working well, and we are growing quite fast in the US now. So I think at some point I'll hire some people in the US too. But for now it's working. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so as well as, let's say, the complexity of running a business split over the two continents like that, it also puts personal pressure on yourself. When we talked earlier on before we started that you're coming to France 3-4 times a year, usually staying for 2-3 weeks, whatever it might be. You mentioned that you've got kids. You obviously have a wife as well, living in Boulder. And you talked also earlier on about the importance of balance and the fact that maybe in those early days it was tough for you. So how do you maintain, or I guess maybe the first question is, are you able to maintain a balance? And if the answer is yes, then what's your kind of approach to that?
Yes. Yeah. So no, there are some time during the year where it's tough to manage the, work and life balance. But I really try to always have it in mind. When I come to France and work with a team in France, I have zero work-life balance. Basically, I just work, get the maximum of stuff done, and then so that I can spend more time with my family when I go back to the US. I usually start very early, so I'm starting to work with a French team. It's 6 a.m. my time, so that it's 2 p.m. in France, and so I have the whole afternoon to work with them, and then I try to stop quite early in the afternoon, about 5 p.m. So it just gives me time with my wife and kids in the evening. So that's how I try to organize it.
Okay. Yeah. And how important is the sport and outdoors to you now in kind of maintaining that? You talked about the fact that obviously Colorado is a stunning state, and Boulder obviously being on the kind of foothills of the mountains there. So is that still important for you?
I tried, and it's I realized that when I don't exercise for some time, it's not good for anyone. So I try to run a couple of times a week. Then we try to go on hikes with my wife and sometimes my kids on the weekends. So we try to spend as much time as possible outside.
Well, in a place like that, I would it sounds like a definitely a good idea. So what would you consider to be your most important task as the leader of this business?
I would say, just to keep the team motivated and happy. Yeah, it's a big, we are a small team. So you want to make sure that first everyone is happy. And to me, that's the most important thing. And then efficient. So we try to, optimize a lot of the processes all the time. We try to use, new technologies also to, save time on the stuff where basically, that are not as important as others. And then, when I come back to the office, what the team tells me is that I try to bring I have a peaceful, or I would say a relaxed approach to things. So they feel a little bit less stressed when I'm here, which is a little bit strange, but than when I'm not here. And so that's big part of what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
And is that I don't know, calmness that you're bringing? Is that something that you're conscious of, and you're consciously doing that, or would you say that's just your kind of natural personality and approach?
I don't think it was a natural approach, but again, over the last 8 years, I've had so much ups and downs that I feel like now I'm just I learn on not to get too excited and not too stressed, and so that's maybe why I have a more balanced approach on that end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So connected to that question, so what's the most, but also the least enjoyable part of your role?
The most enjoyable is to see, I would say, to see success in our distribution, the performance of the brands, of the products in the stores. And again, to me, it's like, to see that the team seems to be happy working here. The biggest challenge is cash and finance. And, we have, and it's typical of the industry, but basically you have, peaks of needs in terms of cash flow. And the more you grow, the bigger those peaks are. And so you are always, anticipating and trying to find ways to finance your next production. And I would say that's the biggest challenge to me, because even if you grow, it's like, it's never, never easy in terms of finance. So, yeah.
So do you, because as you said, I mean, because of the nature of the business, you have this almost constant funding need, even with growth. So you having to invest a lot of your own time in that, kind of continuing to looking for ways to continue funding, and obviously the funding gets bigger as well. So is that something you spend a lot of time on?
Oh yeah, it's a big portion of my job, big portion of the stress. And we fundraised early 2023.
Okay.
So I would say that gave us 18 months that were good, and where I really could focus on growing the business. But we are again in this phase now where, how are we going to finance the next production? So it's, spending a lot of time with banks, with some of our shareholders, and, trying to find creative ways to finance it. And, in the US, there are ways, and maybe not for the whole things, but at least partial, but it's very expensive, with very, very high interest rates. So it's also, how much are you willing to pay to fund some of the stuff. So it's like, always again a compromise and a balance.
Looking back over your career, who would you say have been the people that have influenced you the most professionally over your career?
I learned a lot from my previous general managers and CEOs at Millet, Lafuma, Eider, on stuff to do and stuff not to do, or that at least I didn't want to do. And so that was, I learned a lot. And also being in charge of the US subsidiary, it was almost like running my own business, because the management would come maybe once or twice a year max, but without the financial risk. So that was also a good experience.
I'm sure.
And then I talked to a bunch of people in the industry, and especially in the US. It's a very different approach, compared to the European management. So I also gathered info and learned from different people from the industry.
So after 25 years of working in the outdoor and the lifestyle industry, what would you say are the best, but also the worst things about our industries?
I would say, the best is, a lot of brands do great products to be used outside, and I would say the goal and the products are great. To me, one challenge is we are making too much products or too many products, and that's something we should try to get a control of. And it's always a challenge to to manage your inventory and your risk the right way. But I would say all the brands should kind of maybe get together to reduce inventory, reduce production, make sure that every single product that's being made is needed. And I would say that's, to me, that's one of the biggest challenge. When I look on the footwear side, Every year, there are about 25 billion pairs of shoes being produced. We had the discussion with the team a couple of days ago on, what a billion is. And a billion second, for example, it's 32 years. So it means that each year we produce 750 years or 750 seconds worth of products. It's huge, and we don't realize how big it is, how much impact it has. So we need to be very cautious on, our approach, the way we produce, and try to make sure that we don't waste, basically. Yeah.
But I think it's super difficult now. I mean, I think when you have especially publicly owned companies that are focused on delivering value for the shareholders. It's
but at the same time, we all price and all the brands price products because that you have a percentage that's going to be on sale where you don't make any money or you lose money. If tomorrow, you produce less, but every single product you sell is at the margin and the profit you expect. At the end of the day, maybe the top line will be less, but the bottom line will be the same. It's and I've learned also from with SAOLA, we have produced too much, in 2022, for example. So we have been moving this excess inventory for the last 18 months. At a break even or at a loss, and at the end of the day, we have sales on top, but we are losing money. So our approach for 2025, for example, is to be much more careful on the risk. We might lose some sales, but at the end we will sell the products we have at full price, and I'm sure it will be beneficial.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
If you look at big, and maybe not in the outdoor industry, but brands like H&M, I don't know what the percentage of products they sell at on sale, but it's huge. I'm sure they could do maybe half of what they produce and do the same profit. But it's just a vision and a politic that the management has to apply.
Simple.
But it's the same, if you look at on the food industry, same thing. I mean, you have about between 20 and 30% of food that goes to waste. You want to reduce, cost and price, just make sure that we just produce what we need.
So what's the most valuable piece of advice you've ever received?
One of a very valuable piece of advice was from a friend who now is a shareholder, who told me to make sure that my wife was on board. And because it's sometimes when you launch a business are very difficult, and again it has an impact on the whole family. And he's like, make sure that you talk about the challenges and that basically everything is clear, and that she continues to support the project. And I told my wife that if at some point that was too much, I would sell or do something else, but because this has to remain the top priority.
Okay, so because if I understand well, you actually also work with your wife. So when you say on board, you mean on board with the project rather than necessarily working
on board.
together?
She joined the company last year when we moved back to the US. And it's great to work together, but also she has a good understanding of both continents, both cultures, so it's great to have someone like that in the team as well. But it's more like on the personal side, because there are some nights where you don't sleep. There are some just months where you're like, you don't pay yourself, or it just is delayed. And so that has an impact, on your life. So, I want to make sure that she's okay with the situation.
Okay. And how, this is now very personal advice for me. So, how do you manage the relationship in terms of actually working together?
That's it's funny because we have talked about working together for quite a lot of years, and it just came kind of naturally. So and we try to like every couple of months to discuss and see if again it's a good balance between work and our personal lives, and so far so good. It's just been a bit more than a year, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think people can some people can do it, some don't, and it's fine as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So looking back, what would you say has been the biggest challenge of your career?
My biggest challenge was to have in my mind too high expectations for the business, or thinking it would grow a lot faster than it has. And so you don't expect the challenges to last as long, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about being more realistic, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's just be more realistic, but at the same time, when you start, and again, when you start from scratch,
Yeah.
what can you be realist about?
Yeah.
You don't know. So it's a lot of unknown.
Yeah.
So you learn as you go, and again, it's there are a few things I might change, looking back, but if I didn't go through the challenges or the whole process, I would have never known anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you ever think about bringing on a co-founder with you to kind of support you in that growth and to benefit from, I don't know, another area of expertise?
Yeah, I did think about it. I did.
Okay.
And it didn't work out.
Okay.
So yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So that was yeah, and that brought a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
But again, it's like in a personal relationship, you think everything's going to be great, and at the end, it doesn't work. And I wished it would have worked, but yeah, it was not the case.
And looking back at that situation, if you were again looking for another co-founder, what would your approach be different?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I would first be more careful. I would I was again very enthusiastic about the whole process. So I gave some shares, I gave some a bunch of stuff, and I didn't think about a negative outcome enough.
Okay.
So I would say I would be more careful. I would go more step by step, and maybe open myself and options more after a longer period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So if you could give future leaders of the industry 3 pieces of advice, what would you give them? What would you tell them?
So the first one is what we discussed a bit earlier, is make sure that the environment is in your business, because we are all part of the solution, and it's easier to have it from day one than trying to bring it afterwards. Listen to listen, but understand what people tell you. So I would say that's another advice. And and try to also maybe have an international vision, because as we discussed, that can also bring, when there are challenges in some countries, some more stable business overall. Yeah.
Great. So if today was your last day and you were going to retire, what would you?
It's not today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where do I sign? What would be your message to your team?
Message to my team would be to make sure that they continue to do stuff they like, and you spend so much time of your life at work that you want to make sure that it is something that you grow into every day, and and make sure that they think also about their work and life balance.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's a perfect place to to finish. So thank you very much, Guillaume, for your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
And for sharing so many great insights. I think, it's doing the research for the episode was super interesting, and I imagine that all the things that you've learned over the years is super valuable. So thanks for sharing some of that today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Guillaume. If you did, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for your support, and I look forward to seeing you soon for our next episode.